William R. Nopper II was born in 1914 in Pittston, Pennsylvania. As a child, he worked at one of the local coal mines and would go on to attend Duquesne University in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, where he was a 3-year starter on the offensive and defensive line. During his junior season, Duquesne finished the year ranked number 10 in the nation. After graduating in the spring of 1941, he would sign a contract with the Detroit Lions to play professional football. Unfortunately, before he could report to the Lions, he received this induction to notice into the U.S. Army. During training, this article says he had the highest score on the rifle range of some 220 recruits. The article goes on to say that he was set to report to the Detroit Lions, but Bill said he had to report to his Uncle Sam first. Bill was then assigned to an artillery battery at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. While on leave with his friend Van Wood, he met Margaret Barnes, who was a nurse and taking care of Van's father at the local Lynchburg hospital. Upon meeting Margaret, he said to his buddy that he was going to marry that girl, and the two began dating. In February 1943, Bill was transferred to Company B, 638th Tank Destroyer Battalion, while they were stationed at Camp Livingston, Louisiana. In April of 1943, Bill and Margaret were married in Lynchburg, Virginia, and then took a train to New York City, where they had a romantic candlelight dinner at the Hotel New Yorker due to a blackout. The 638th then took part in desert training in Yuma, Arizona in December 1943 and January 1944. In May 1944, Bill and Margaret celebrated the birth of their son, William Nopper III. The 638th were then stationed at Camp Gruber, Oklahoma, where this picture of Company B was taken, and you can see Bill in the back row center. The battalion then transferred to Camp Kilmore, New Jersey, before boarding a ship in New York Harbor on September 12, 1944. They spent 13 days at sea before landing at the port of Cherbourg in France. Upon arriving in France, the battalion was equipped with the M18 Hellcat. Each of Company B's 3 platoons were equipped with 4 M18s for a total of 12 Hellcats in the company. The Hellcat was lightly armored, weighing only 18 tons, but was meant to be fast and maneuverable, and was the fastest tracked vehicle of World War II, reaching 55 miles an hour. The Hellcat had an open turret to allow better visibility and reduce weight, but it also meant that the crew was susceptible to overhead artillery fire and sniper fire. It was also fitted with a 76mm main gun and a 50 caliber anti-aircraft machine gun. As Company First Sergeant, Bill was part of Company B's headquarters platoon and spent much of his time assisting the company commander, Captain Golden. The 638th traveled through Carentan and then spent several weeks patrolling the Normandy coast. This also included several days near Omaha Beach, helping to find mines for the engineers to detonate. The 638th Tank Destroyer Battalion was then attached to the 84th Infantry Division, known as the Rail Splitters. The 638th joined the 84th on the front lines on November 20th, 1944, in the vicinity of Geilenkirchen, Germany. The 84th had just crossed into Germany, having defeated the German defensive positions known as the Siegfried Line. Geilenkirchen is located near the borders of Belgium and the Netherlands, and is located approximately 13 miles north of the German city of Aachen. It is here, in the vicinity of Geilenkirchen, where we will start our journey following Pop's footsteps in Europe. Our first stop is the town of Lindern. On November 27, 1944, the tank destroyers from Company B fired 9 rounds at this very railroad crossing. The company daily log doesn't say why they targeted the railroad crossing, but it's a unique opportunity to stand here because on most occasions, we only know the approximate area, but here we know that this was the exact target. It was also in this vicinity that Company B encountered its first German tank. On December 1st, one Hellcat from 1st Platoon fired 5 rounds at a German Tiger tank. 2 of the rounds hit their target, but ricocheted off the Tiger tank. The Germans responded with artillery fire, and one of the 88mm rounds landed 2 yards in front of one of the tank destroyers. Another 88mm round exploded overhead, and shrapnel pierced the helmet of Private Arnold Malvitz, killing him instantly. Private Malvitz was the first member of Company B to be killed. On December 3rd, 2nd Platoon fired 21 rounds from Lindern and destroyed a church steeple in Brockelen that the Germans were using as an artillery observation post. And the company daily log notes that there was a decrease in German artillery and mortar fire. In general, Company B was under almost constant German artillery and mortar harassing fire between December 1st and December 5th. The company daily log reported that several men from the company had to be removed from the front lines as a result of shell shock. On December 8th, one of the tank destroyers from 2nd Platoon got stuck in the field outside the small village of Atweiler, and the crew had to abandon the Hellcat. Under the cover of darkness, the crew returned to the tank destroyer and was able to recover it. Since they were in an exposed field, they made a quick withdrawal to Atweiler, where it accidentally backed over a stack of American anti-tank mines, destroying the Hellcat and killing 6 men from Company B. Lieutenant David Saltman, who was a battalion liaison officer, wrote about the incident and said the turret was removed from the chassis of the Hellcat and landed in the wreckage of a building 200 yards from the site of the explosion, with 2 crew members still inside. The body of the tank destroyer somersaulted and came to rest 25 yards away, with the body of the driver so badly burned he was unrecognizable. The remains of the other men were scattered among the rooftops of the surrounding town. Lieutenant Saltman said it was the most horrible disaster he had ever seen. Prior to taking positions in Prumern, Company B spent 2 days in the nearby town of Frielenberg, where the tank destroyers fired 137 rounds at German positions, including a revolving haystack that turned out to be a camouflaged German gun. Here in Prumern, the company's Hellcats fired 205 rounds at German pillboxes, infantry, and harassing fire. On December 19th, a German bomb landed just 25 feet from a tank destroyer from 3rd Platoon, and luckily the bomb turned out to be a dud and did not explode. The next day at 5 p.m., on December 20th, the 638th, along with the 84th Infantry Division, left their positions near Geilenkirchen, Germany, and traveled approximately 90 miles and arrived around 2 a.m. on December 21st in the vicinity of Marche, Belgium, to reinforce the American lines in what would become known as the Battle of the Bulge. Marche was a strategic town with a network of 5 main roads leading in and out of the town, with one road connecting Marche with Bastogne, approximately 23 miles to the southeast. When they arrived in Marche, the Germans generally occupied the positions southeast of, south, and west of the town. The arrival of the 84th prevented the Germans from taking Marche, and the town dedicated this memorial to the memory of the 84th Infantry Division. A little more than 5 miles east of Marche is the town of Houghton, Belgium, which lies along the Ourthe River. The bridge over the Ourthe River and the roads in and out of Houghton, including one that directly led to Marche, was a major objective for the German advance. On December 22nd, 1st Platoon, led by Lieutenant Charles Bryson, set up positions south of the bridge on the western side of the river. One German Tiger tank approached Houghton from the east. The tank destroyers fired 10 rounds at the Tiger tank and scored 3 frontal hits, but none of the rounds penetrated the armor of the German Tiger tank. The German Tiger tank fired 5 rounds in return that all went overhead. Lieutenant Bryson decided to move the platoon to better firing positions on a hill overlooking the town, and 4 additional German tanks were reserved in the same general area. The tank destroyers hit the frontal tank with 4 rounds, which resulted in the ammunition storage to explode, and the tank burst into flames. The second German tank was hit from the flank and set on fire with the second hit. 3 direct hits were scored on the third tank, and the fourth tank was hit with 2 rounds, and the ammunition storage of both tanks exploded, and both tanks burned. 4 direct hits were recorded on the 5th German tank, and one of the rounds disabled the tracks of the tank, but the tank was still able to return fire. A German half-track was then observed behind 2 trees, and the tank destroyers destroyed the half-track with 2 direct hits. By the end of the fight, 1st Platoon had knocked out 5 German tanks and 1 German half-track with no losses of their own. The town of Houghton commemorated this memorial to Lieutenant Bryson and Company B for their actions on December 22nd in repulsing the German advance. On December 23rd, 2 tank destroyers from 1st Platoon took up positions in Hamptow and fired 8 rounds at a chateau used by the Germans as an observation post and set the house on fire. A German half-track then drove off and escaped. The Germans had an anti-tank gun located outside the house, and 3 German soldiers emerged from the house waving 2 Red Cross flags. The tank destroyers held their fire thinking the Germans wanted to surrender. The Germans then dropped the flags and attempted to fire the anti-tank gun. Seeing what the Germans were doing, the tank destroyer fired first, but missed the anti-tank gun, but destroyed a German armored car, killing at least 3 Germans. A second round for the tank destroyer damaged the anti-tank gun. The tank destroyers then fired 12 rounds into 2 houses that the Germans occupied, destroying the houses, and 7 Germans crawled out from the rubble. On December 26th, approximately 100 German infantry attacked Hamptow and pushed 1st Platoon and a small unit from the 84th Infantry Division into the town. The men from 1st Platoon, who were not part of a tank destroyer crew, fought as infantry along the doughboys from the 84th. 2 Hellcats fired 12 rounds into the German ranks, which the company daily log said had a swell effect on the course of the battle. The tank destroyers also fired 3 rounds at a house, and estimated to have killed 30 Germans occupying the house. This allowed the doughboys from the 84th to free 5 of their fellow soldiers who were trapped in an adjoining house. Corporal James Fleming described the fighting to the 84th Infantry Division newspaper and said the following: "That afternoon we had a hell of a fight. The Germans tried kicking us out of town when they opened up with artillery and mortars. We saw Germans rushing down the hill in waves, like the movies, you know. We fired point blank into their bunched ranks with high explosives, and they fell like wheat. That night, we couldn't sleep hearing the screams of the German wounded lying on the slope." While at the Bulge, Bill sent home this Christmas card, which he illustrated himself sleeping on the snow somewhere between France and Germany, and he's dreaming of Margaret holding their son next to the Christmas tree. The card reads, "Thinking of you always. Merry Christmas to my darling family. Forever your loving husband and dad." On Christmas morning, Bill, Captain Golden, and Private George Morrison left the company command post just east of Marche in a jeep to recon a cowhide at Bourdon. German tanks and small arms from the top of the hill began firing at the command post and 2nd Platoon's positions near the command post. They started back to the command post on the road between Bourdon and the command post when the Germans on the hill spotted them and opened up with artillery fire, and it was clear the Germans had the road zeroed in. Bill told PFC Morrison to drive off of the road and into a snow-covered field. Just as Morrison did so, the road erupted in artillery fire, and the men from the command post thought Bill and the men in the jeep were killed, and they were in shock when they received a radio call that everyone was okay. Captain Golden wrote in the company daily log, "We miraculously were not hit." The German fire that morning knocked out 2 tank destroyers from 2nd Platoon, and since the sun was in their eyes, they could not observe the German tank that was firing at them to return fire. Around 2 p.m. on the same day, they observed 4 German tanks, and the remaining Hellcats from 2nd Platoon fired 7 rounds, destroying 1 German Mark IV tank. 4 men from Company B were wounded from the German mortar fire and from the 5 rounds that the German tanks fired in return. Around the same time, 3rd Platoon came under fire from 2 German tanks. The tank destroyers from 3rd Platoon fired 14 rounds, and infantry observers from the 84th reported that one of the tanks was hit, and the crew exited and took off from the tank. All of this occurred on Christmas Day. On December 26th, 3rd Platoon moved into Marine and captured 9 Germans. 3rd Platoon received a report that a large German column was approaching the crossroads west of town. The German column included at least 9 tanks, 12 half-tracks loaded with infantry, and a tank destroyer. 3rd Platoon also reported infantry running alongside the vehicles. The Germans had no intention of getting into an extended firefight, and quickly moved through Marine and headed east toward the small town of Menil. During a short firefight, one of the Hellcats from 3rd Platoon was hit and set on fire, and one of the tank destroyers knocked out a German tank destroyer at one half-track. As the German column moved down the road toward Menel, artillery was called and fired on the German column, inflicting heavy casualties. Lieutenant Bryson commanded 1st Platoon and was situated on a farm between Marine and Menel, in the approximate location of where we are standing right now. After the German force left Marine, they passed 1st Platoon, and Lieutenant Bryson would tell the story how 1st Platoon concealed their men and vehicles from the much larger German force that passed by. After passing by, Lieutenant Bryson could hear the American artillery pound the German column, and they later saw a large number of German dead and knocked out vehicles in the vicinity of Menel. On December 27th, 3rd Platoon was located between Marine and Menel and knocked out a German half-track. The platoon also came across 2 abandoned American jeeps that the Germans had captured, with 1 dead German soldier. One of the jeeps had the markings of the 84th Infantry Division, and the other jeep had the markings from the 101st Airborne. On December 26th, 2nd Platoon took positions here in Menel, and one of their bazooka teams knocked out a German Mark IV tank with 2 rounds into the back of the tank. On December 27th, 2nd Platoon fired 4 rounds and set afire a German armored vehicle. On January 9th, 1st and 2nd Platoons took positions in a small town of Ciel. 2nd Platoon was overlooking the La Roche Highway and observed a column of 5 German vehicles. The tank destroyers from 2nd Platoon opened fire from a range of approximately 2,200 yards and destroyed 3 Mark IV tanks, 1 self-propelled gun, and 1 general-purpose vehicle. Later, 2 tank destroyers from 1st Platoon were slightly damaged by artillery fire from a German 150mm gun that fired 45 rounds at their positions. 2nd Platoon was able to fire 6 rounds and knocked out the German gun. This was the last engagement for Company B during the Battle of the Bulge. However, on January 11th, one of the tank destroyers from 3rd Platoon hit a mine and had to be taken for repairs. Between January 12th and February 2nd, the company continued to occupy several different positions in Belgium, performing much needed maintenance and repairs on their vehicles. On February 3rd, the 638th left Belgium and traveled 54 miles to Herlin, Holland.